It had been 4 years. Peter Parker reflected on the bite, how it still felt like yesterday, how the pain of it had long since faded, but the results had most certainly stuck around. 4 years of making amends. Every single day, he tried. He still wasn't entirely sure he knew what he was doing, but he told himself he was getting better at it. At least as Spider-Man. As Peter Parker, that was a different story. It was 1966. He swung through the city on a Tuesday morning, having just spent the better part of it putting Mysterio away, which meant he had missed 2 classes. 1 more year of college left, a great internship at the Baxter Building already locked in. He couldn't afford to mess things up, not now, not when everything was finally starting to come together. Though even as he thought it, something else nagged at him. Aunt May hadn't slept a single night easy since guys his age started getting drafted. Being in school kept him safe for the time being. But Peter wondered, not for the first time, whether he should run to Canada or whether he should just sign up. All that power, and maybe it could make a real difference over there. But then what? Bring his Spidey costume to a war zone? He turned the question over in his mind. Was there a moral imperative? Some deeper obligation to give up the secret, if it meant helping a greater number of people? The thought unsettled him. He was still wrestling with it when someone called his name. Harry Osborn was standing beside a car that had apparently given up on him entirely, late for biology and thoroughly annoyed. He introduced Peter to the man standing beside him, his father, Norman Osborn. Norman shook Peter's hand with the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted his own authority. He told Peter to call him Norman, and mentioned almost as an afterthought that he'd been following Peter's trajectory for some time. The Lazarevic Award for Electrical Engineering, a full scholarship. He found it impressive, and wondered whether Peter had sorted out his internship yet, because Osborn Industries had a place for him. But Peter told him he had sorted it, his internship at the Baxter Building. Norman said that was a shame. Harry hurried his father into the car, and they were gone. Peter stood on the sidewalk for a moment. His spider sense had been humming, not loudly, just a low, barely there vibration, like a radio signal that couldn't quite tune in. He wondered if it was simply intimidation at work, some subconscious read on a man who was, by any measure, both a scientific genius and a ruthless capitalist. He wondered if he was reading Norman Osborn as a threat. He filed it away and went to class. The lab was already in session when Peter arrived, and Gwen Stacy let him know it. She informed him, in the particular tone she reserved for his worst offenses, that he had skipped their study breakfast and left her alone at their bench, twisting in the wind. Peter apologized and offered his aunt as the reason. Gwen said flatly that his aunt was a very convenient excuse, and that she didn't know why she even gave him the time of day. Peter told her it was because he was fab and she was a fox. She told him he wasn't as charming as he thought. They got to work. Peter watched her as she moved through the experiment and thought, not for the first time, that he understood Gwen perfectly. She just didn't understand him. He wanted to make a move. He really did. But everything was so complicated. May's health, his life as Spider-Man, the constant juggling act that was slowly grinding him down. Professor Warren appeared suddenly to inform Peter that he was late, that he clearly believed himself to be above all of this, and that he shouldn't drag Gwen down with him. Peter apologized again. Gwen, softening slightly, told him the only thing he needed to do right now was get his hands on some money, enough to actually buy her an apology drink. She suggested there was exactly one place he could get bread fast, and one man controlling the purse strings. From outside the Daily Bugle building, even before Peter reached the door, he could hear J. Jonah Jameson. Jameson's office was its usual war zone. He held Peter's latest batch of photos aloft like evidence at a trial, and not evidence in Peter's favor. He demanded to know what Peter thought these were. Did Spider-Man fight this man in a spa? A Russian bathhouse? He needed good, clear photos of Spider-Man committing crimes, actual crimes. Peter began to point out how many times Spider-Man had saved people before Jonah Jameson cut him off. He wrote out a slip for $20, the lot of them, told Peter to go buy a monkey's record or something, and made clear that he didn't want to see him again without pictures that were actually worth his time. Then he told him to get out. Then he told him to get out. Betty, from her desk, told Peter sympathetically that JJ had been even more hacked off than usual. It hadn't been the best few days for him. She lowered her voice and told Peter, not that he heard it from her, that the cops had been talking to Jonah a couple days ago about his involvement with the Scorpion and what they were calling the Spider Slayers. They suspected he had funded them. Possibly more. Peter thought about that as Betty handed back his payment. On the way out, the television in the lobby caught his eye. A news broadcast was covering the war. A battle north of Saigon. American casualties. The Pentagon stating the numbers would have been significantly higher if not for the presence of Iron Man at the scene. With the recent surge of American superheroes, the anchor was noting, questions were being raised about whether anyone exhibiting abilities beyond the average person should be automatically drafted into military service. Peter stared at the screen. Then the broadcast cut to New York City and to Captain America. Rumors had been circulating, the anchor said, that the original war superhero was soon to join the conflict in Vietnam, pressured by Washington, pressured by public opinion. Peter stood very still. If Cap signed up, if someone who had already sacrificed that much, already given a whole war to the country, then what excuse did Peter Parker have? He didn't have a good answer, but he had somewhere to be. Flash Thompson was shipping out, and tonight was his goodbye party. The bar was crowded and warm, and Peter arrived late. Flash was there in his uniform, and Harry was there, and Gwen, and MJ, and Norman Osborn himself, who had apparently shown up to thank Flash personally for his service, and to let everyone in the room know exactly where his son fell short by comparison. Harry was tight-jawed. MJ pulled him aside, told him to forget his father and have a good time. Norman said loudly that he wasn't sure what Harry believed in, but it did his heart good to see that his son had friends who were true heroes. Peter, walking in, offered that he was jealous of Flash voluntarily flying halfway around the world to live the high school bully's dream. Flash told him it was a little early for that kind of talk. Things might have escalated from there, but Gwen got between them and reminded Peter very quietly that Flash was leaving on Saturday. He might not come back. Peter looked at Flash for a long moment. Then he walked over and apologized. Flash waited for the punchline, some Parker zinger, some pot shot. But there wasn't one. Peter said simply that high school had been rough for him, and that Flash had been a big part of that. He knew Flash had grown since then. Sometimes Peter still hadn't. Flash, after a beat, said he got it. He was sorry too. He was proud of the uniform, but he still felt the looks when he wore it, and honestly, it helped him know where people stood. His girlfriend pressed him on it, asked why he was really doing this. Flash's own father had gone to war and come back worse for it. Flash thought about it for a moment. Then he smiled and said it was easy, really. He was doing it because it was what Spider-Man would do. He said Spider-Man risked his life every day without even showing his face, and he had always been Spider-Man's #1 fan. Now he could prove it by doing what Spidey did, by helping people. Peter didn't say anything. Flash wandered off to chat up some women he'd spotted. And Peter sat at the bar, turning over what he'd just heard. Was Flash really going because of me? Him? He was still sitting with it when a voice said, "Hello." Norman Osborn settled onto the bar stool beside him and bought Peter his Coke without being asked. He said he found it hard to believe a smart kid like Peter didn't have any money. But then again, there were medical bills. For Aunt May, wasn't it? Peter asked how he knew that. Norman said Harry had probably mentioned it. Or, and here his eyes took on a certain quality, Maybe he had been following Peter. Perhaps following Peter had become his new hobby. Perhaps it was because Peter's spider sense screamed. Norman leaned in close and said very quietly that he knew Peter, the real Peter. Then he told him to look up, top shelf. Peter looked. There was a jack-o'-lantern sitting up there, looking for all the world like ordinary Halloween decoration. Norman informed him in the same measured tone that he had 10 of them hidden around the bar. If Peter attempted to warn anyone or to deactivate them, he would detonate them all. They would both survive. His son probably would. Would the rest? Norman said, in 30 seconds, Peter would stand up. He would act as though nothing was wrong. He would walk toward the back door, step out into the alley, and nobody would die. Peter stood up in 30 seconds. He walked past Harry, past MJ, past Gwen laughing at something, and he went through the back door. In the alley, the Green Goblin was waiting. The mask was green and yellow and grinning in a way that Norman Osborn's face never had. Peter's mind processed it in the half-second before instinct took over. Norman Osborn is the Green Goblin. The Goblin address called him the Pest, who had been ruining all his plans. Peter twisted clear of the first pumpkin bomb and started moving, drawing him away from the bar. He said he had always wondered why Gobby wore such an ugly mask. The Goblin told him that Peter had it backwards. He didn't want to kill him. He wanted Peter to live exactly like this. A double life, a secret identity, a totem of something greater. He wanted Peter to be more like him. The Goblin fired. 3 blasts in quick succession. Peter rolled, took cover, pulled himself back up. He thought of Flash inside. He thought of Gwen. And then he saw Gwen. She had come out the back, and a lit pumpkin bomb was rolling toward her. The explosion threw them both. Peter came up through the smoke, barely in one piece. The Goblin grabbed him, still ranting, still insisting that Harry was useless, that Peter was brilliant, that he should embrace the double life. He produced a syringe filled with Goblin formula. Peter shot 2 lines of webbing and brought a section of the Daily Bugle signage crashing down directly onto Norman, telling him he was just helping him see the light. The smoke cleared. The Goblin lay crumpled in the wreckage. Peter stood in his Spider-Man suit, breathing hard, and looked at the man buried under debris and flame. He thought about it, really thought about it, that if he simply didn't pull Norman out, the secret would hold. People would be safe. It was a clean solution to a terrible problem. He said it to himself, not to save him. Then he pulled Norman free anyway. He told Norman it was over, that he was going to make sure he rotted in prison. But Norman blinked up at him and asked what was happening, thanked him. His voice was soft and genuinely confused. Peter looked at him, at the blank, unguarded face, and thought probably he didn't remember. The electricity, maybe? The chemicals? Whatever had happened in the explosion, Norman Osborn had come back from it without any memory of the Goblin at all. He told the police it had been a costume party attack. He brought Norman to the hospital. He waited until his spider sense confirmed Norman wasn't lying, and it stayed silent. Norman was telling the truth. He genuinely did not remember. So why was he still worried? He swung through the city and thought about Aunt May. He thought about telling her everything, packing up, starting over somewhere Norman couldn't find them. He thought about Gwen. Things were just starting with her. He could feel it. He thought about whether he could really walk away from all of that. He was still thinking about it when he ran into Captain America mid-crime scene. They took down the situation together, Cap with his shield, Peter with his quips. And afterward, Cap thanked him for the assist. Peter said he'd noticed the fan club downstairs. They stood on a rooftop while the city moved below them, and Cap said the questions had been coming faster lately, people wanting to know where he stood on Vietnam, what he was going to do. Peter said he had similar problems. Cap said he had spent 2 decades on ice, to wake up at the end of one war and find himself staring down another, a very different one. It was a lot to carry. He didn't know if this war was right. But he knew people were dying, he said, and the country's name was attached to it. He had power. Didn't that mean responsibility? Peter said he didn't know. Cap told him that responsibility didn't mean being at the whims of the world. It was about selflessness. It was about sacrifice. He said watching Spider-Man throw himself into danger every day made it clear that Peter already understood both of those things. He told Peter to let his heart guide him. Then he said he would see him soon, and went. Peter looked out over the city for a long moment. Peter thought, he's Captain America. Of course he's right. The next morning, Peter called in an anonymous tip. He gave the police enough to start looking, and once they started, it didn't take long. Norman had no alibi for any of the Green Goblin's appearances. His secret room at Osborn Industries turned up quickly after that. The news hit the city like a stone dropped in still water. It was confusing for everyone. Most confusing of all for Norman, who still didn't remember a single thing. Peter almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But he couldn't risk what might happen if the Goblin ever came back. He thought about Harry and felt a cold weight settle over him. He hadn't been a good enough friend lately. He knew that. He was thinking about checking in on Harry when it hit him. Flash. Flash's train was today. He'd been avoiding him since the party, still raw from that night. And now Flash had 10 minutes before he left. The only way Peter was making that in time was as Spider-Man. He suited up and moved. But he didn't make it. He ran into the train station in his street clothes, breathless, and found Gwen standing near the great clock. She looked at him with the expression she saved for the moments she had decided to give up on being surprised. She told him Flash's train had left 20 minutes ago. Peter said nothing for a moment, then regretted. Gwen asked him what was wrong with him. She said he was a legitimate genius, and she had seen the way he was with his aunt. Gwen wanted, she needed, to believe he cared about people. Because if he actually cared, then she stopped herself, told him to forget it. Peter said she was right. He had been terrible. He said he tried to do the right thing, it just always got messed up. He wished he could explain why, but he couldn't. Not really. Not yet. Then something shifted between them, the kind of shift that you can't pull back from. She stepped closer, and her hand found his chest, and she felt something through the fabric, and she pulled very slightly at the collar of his jacket. Beneath it was the Spider-Man suit. Gwen stared at it. Then she looked up at him. And in the middle of the busy train station, surrounded by strangers going about their ordinary lives, the question that had lived between them for years finally had an answer, just not the one either of them had been expecting. A year later, in 1967, in the dense jungle heat of Vietnam, Captain America was already there, without the armor, without the press corps, standing between a group of terrified villagers and a soldier who had long since lost his grip on the reason any of them had come. The soldier was raising his gun. Cap knocked him aside, shield catching rifle, camouflage painted and mud-streaked, and turned to address the scene with a quiet finality. These people were under his protection. Many days passed. It was 1977, and Peter Parker was standing at a grave. Peter had slipped away to be there, alone, or so he thought. Gwen found him early, which came as no surprise to her. She recognized the anniversary of the friend's death for what it always was to Peter, another appointment with his own guilt. She told him so, not unkindly, and he didn't argue. He mentioned the others in passing. Harry was running Osborn Industries now, in charge since Norman had been locked away. Whether Harry was happy was hard to say. Running his father's business wasn't easy under the best of circumstances, and the circumstances were far from that. Professor Warren had left the university and started his own bioengineering company, cutting-edge work, and Gwen had gone on to become his chief biologist. Peter noted, with a trace of dry humor, that having a healthy ego helped, because Gwen made considerably more than he did. She didn't exactly disagree. The conversation turned, as it always did on this day, to Flash. Peter said quietly that he could have saved him. He knew it. Gwen listened, and when he asked how any of them were supposed to be happy, how he was supposed to feel anything but guilty while people he knew were overseas dying, she took his hand and looked at him steadily. She told him she loved him. She told him he was allowed to be happy. The world, she said, never ran short of challenges or sadness. That was simply how it was, and he couldn't let it swallow him whole. The dead didn't want people to wallow in their memory. They wanted the living to live. So they walked away from Flash Thompson's grave together. Peter told himself Gwen was right. She was always right. But he still dwelled on the past when his mind should have been in the present. Meanwhile, the war was still going. It dragged on like an old wound that wouldn't close. And at the Future Foundation, where Peter had been working alongside Reed Richards, Reed read the papers and felt the familiar weight settle over him. The headlines told a grim story. Captain America had gone rogue, saving lives on both sides, refusing to follow orders. The military insisted Iron Man had the situation handled. The Viet Cong were pushing toward Phuoc Long. Reed said it was all their fault, the superheroes who had kept America in the game, who had made the impossible seem possible just long enough to drag the whole thing out further. Reed said the only sane person in that conflict was Captain America, going his own way, answering to no one. He said Stark and his armored presence were the reason the war was still going, as if winning was actually a possibility, and now they were pulling Giant Man into it. What if someone figured out the science that made a man the size of a building? Reed said it coolly. A nation of giant soldiers, superheroes incapable of thinking through the consequences of their own actions. Peter said that they had a moral responsibility to help. But before Peter could finish his thought, Dr. Otto walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and announced, with the weary patience of a man who'd heard this debate before, that the gentlemen were always with the debates. Peter watched him cross the room and reflected on how strange it still was. Otto Octavius, the man who had once genuinely tried to murder him, was now a colleague, a member in good standing of the Future Foundation. A heart attack had done what years of confrontation hadn't. It had stopped Otto cold and made him reconsider everything. He had come around to the understanding that accumulating power and wealth was a hollow pursuit. And then he had found Aunt May, which had changed things considerably. Now he was, improbably, Uncle Otto, which Peter had never quite gotten used to, and privately suspected he never would. But Otto had a gift for pulling Reed Richards out of his funks, and that counted for a good deal. The Future Foundation's work was genuinely worth being proud of. Mobile communications, advanced prosthetics, safe dimensional travel. Real things, good things. And yet Peter stood at the window looking at the city and thought, shouldn't they be doing more? Across town, in a prison visiting room, Harry Osborn sat across a glass partition from his father. Norman told Harry he looked terrible. Harry said he hadn't come to be insulted. Norman softened, apologized, said the place brought out the worst in him. He told Harry he was glad he came, that Harry was doing him proud, that he knew it couldn't be easy being the son of Norman Osborn, suspected madman. Harry said he appreciated the sentiment. Norman said he just worried. Then he got to the point. He said he'd been hearing word that the Gemini project was out of control, and he needed Harry to rescue the asset before all was lost. Harry had helped him so much. He just needed him to see this through. Harry told him flatly that the plan was crazy, that he needed to save the company, not run around terrorizing people. Norman told him to please, just listen. He reminded Harry that he was the only person in the world he trusted. He told Harry the truth about being the Green Goblin, about his sickness. Spider-Man had ruined his life, had denied him the chance he deserved. If Spider-Man interfered with this plan, the consequences would be significant. and Norman had one more secret he needed to share. Then whatever Norman whispered to his son through that telephone, Harry listened, and when the call ended, his face had changed. Peter, meanwhile, was visiting Gwen at work. Cyprogenesis was a sleek, modern building, and Gwen moved through it with the ease of someone who belonged there. She and Professor Warren, or Miles, as he now insisted on being called, reminding Peter that they were a good decade out of school, had done remarkable work. They had helped fix Kurt Connors, which wouldn't have been possible without Peter having first concocted a cure for the lizard, as Warren pointed out warmly. Peter deflected the compliment, said he'd ended up in electrical engineering, but that his biology classes had never really left him. Warren asked what had brought Peter by. Gwen pointed out with some amusement that he was disrupting the workplace and insisting on disrupting hers as well. Peter claimed he had just stopped by to see his wife before heading out for the night, but Gwen quipped that Peter was going to a new discotheque to support a friend. He said he didn't want to go. He should be home doing his taxes. Then Dr. Warren offered, before Peter could fully leave, that if things ever got too difficult working for Dr. Richards, he would absolutely love to have Peter's engineering expertise on hand. The machines and computers were a little beyond his scope. Peter thanked him, genuinely. Peter thought about how Warren had always been there for them, had even walked Gwen down the aisle after her father died. He was genuinely glad for that, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to work alongside his wife every day. And there was something about the lab. He couldn't place it precisely, but it poked at the edge of his spider sense, a gentle, unidentified hum. Maybe it was the floating prosthetic limbs. Maybe it was something else. He suited up for a party and went to Studio 54. He had fought the Rhino, Craven, and the Lizard, and yet here he was, standing outside a nightclub, genuinely afraid of disco. Harry had put him on the list, something Peter always forgot was possible, given that Harry was essentially obscenely wealthy. Inside, over the pulse of the music and the blur of the lights, Mary Jane Watson found him first, screaming his name across the room with the enthusiasm of someone who had already been at the DJ booth for an indeterminate amount of time. Peter said he didn't think he could last until midnight, that this wasn't really his scene. She asked him from when he had always got so old, and Peter replied that he'd put on a Beatles 45 and be perfectly fine. MJ also said that Harry hadn't quite gotten the evening's particular chemical combination right, and tended to go on about high finance at great length when he got that way. Peter asked if they were okay. MJ said they were fine. Then she said that out of everyone in their group, Peter was always the stick in the mud, the one with the faux concern for others who never actually did anything. Peter started to say something, and she cut him off. She said if he had troubles at work, he should quit. If he didn't want to spend time with his friends, he didn't have to, but he wallowed in regrets. He loved his regrets. He nursed them. Instead of telling Flash Thompson he was making a mistake, instead of actually using all that power to save him, Peter Parker had done nothing, and their friend was dead. Peter said nothing. MJ walked away. He didn't sleep much that night. He told himself it was because he was worried about MJ telling Harry what she knew about him. But if he was honest, and the long, quiet hours before dawn had a way of demanding honesty, it was really because her words had landed, and they may have been right. Should he have gone to Vietnam? Was he just spinning his wheels, swinging around New York, picking up purse snatchers? He showed up at the Future Foundation early enough to find Reed already there. Reed mentioned, with the mild interest of a scientist observing a specimen, that Peter had gone to Studio 54 the previous night. Then Peter brought up the unstable molecules, the clothing Reed had designed for him, and the Fantastic Four, adaptive to flame, stretching with the body, impervious to dirt and damage. Peter said Reed had invented virtually indestructible clothing and asked why he'd never made it public. He could change the world. Reed told him why, carefully. The textile industry was worth trillions of dollars. Tens of millions of livelihoods depended on it. Introducing this technology would create a global upheaval that no one was prepared for. It wouldn't be responsible. Peter said he was tired of Reed acting like he was from another planet, like he couldn't interact with ordinary human beings. These were their people. They were human. Reed said very quietly that he was not. Reed stared at him and said that neither was Giant Man or Iron Man or any of these superheroes with man in their names. They were just trying to convince the world they were still the same as everyone else. The growth of powers, the emergence of mutants, they needed to be careful, or they would end up ruling the world, creating a level of inequality that couldn't be undone. Peter told Reed to listen to himself. Then he added quietly that Reed was so not human that even his wife had left him for a man who lived under the sea. His spider sense fired. He let the slap land anyway. It was, he thought, the least he could do. That morning, Harry Osborn accepted a collect call from his father and said he was ready. On the other hand, Peter had blew it. He knew it before he'd even finished swinging across the city. He had quit, walked out on the greatest mind in the world, and Gwen was going to kill him. They had just bought the townhouse. He hoped Professor Warren's offer still stood. Back at Cyprogenesis, Gwen and Warren were at their stations, talking about Peter in the easy way of two people who had known him long enough to speak honestly. Warren said Peter was quiet, always seemed to be holding on to so much. Gwen replied that he had lost his parents when he was young, then his uncle. He tended to keep people at a distance. Warren said he hoped Peter knew, at least never to push Gwen away. She was the best thing to ever happen to. Suddenly the wall came in. The Black Goblin moved through the wreckage of the lab entrance with the unhurried confidence of someone who had done this before. The costume was dark and sleek, deliberately designed, and the figure inside it told Warren, in a calm and businesslike tone, that there was nothing to discuss. His benefactor, the man who had paid for all of this, wanted what had been promised. He had heard that Warren had broken their agreement and gone ahead with future installments. This could ruin his benefactor's plans, so he had sent the Black Goblin to take what was rightfully owed. Gwen stepped forward and told him to stop, but the Goblin grabbed Warren instead. All of a sudden, Spider-Man came through the window. They fought through the lab, Spider-Man quipping, the Black Goblin efficient and focused, and while Peter kept him occupied, the Goblin scanned the room and found what he was looking for. And then he threw a pumpkin bomb. The blast was enormous. When the smoke thinned, what had been a hidden section of the lab was exposed. 3 large cylindrical pods stood in a row, cracked and sparking from the concussive force. Inside each one, suspended in preservation fluid, was a human figure, unmistakably alive, unmistakably fabricated. The first looked like Norman Osborn. The second looked like Peter Parker. The third looked like Gwen. Warren said he could explain. The Black Goblin removed his helmet. Gwen, her voice barely steady, said, "Harry." It was Harry Osborn. His face was raw with something between grief and fury. He said this was supposed to be just his father, just a clone of Norman. A way for Norman to pin his crimes on someone else, to walk free. But Warren had also made one of Peter. But why? The answer came from Norman's plan as Harry had come to understand it. His father had wanted a Peter Parker. Even after everything, even after all that had been done and lost, Norman Osborn had wanted a Peter Parker as his heir. And Harry, who had given and sacrificed and endured, was still not enough. It was always about Peter. Harry grabbed Spider-Man, screaming it at him, that it was always about Peter, that Peter had sent his father to prison, that Norman had rejected Harry because of him. Peter tried to talk him down, told him he had turned Norman in because he had to, before Norman hurt anyone else, and he was still hurting people. He pleaded with Harry not to give his father this power over him. Harry stopped and lit the bombs. The pumpkin bombs sailed into the pods, and the detonation tore through the building. Warren's scream was raw and total. He clawed toward the destroyed pods. Spider-Man checked Gwen, his wife, standing in the chaos, and she said she was fine. She said the building had been empty except for the clones. She told Peter he had to save them. They were living beings. Peter said, "Okay." He pulled one from the rubble. One only. The Norman clone and the Gwen clone hadn't made it. But the Peter clone, he was alive. If a clone was built from him, it would have spider strength. And it did. He set the figure down among the wreckage and told the others he was sorry. He could only save one. Warren lunged. He pushed past Peter and then cornered against a vault door in the smoke and ruin. He said what had been building for years, what he had designed and waited for in silence behind the warmth of mentorship. He said that Peter would never have known, that his wife, Gwen, was a clone, that he had kept the real Gwendolyn. He had waited patiently, held on to her all this time, until they could leave and be together. Peter screamed Gwen's name into the fire and smoke and debris and found nothing but chaos. He found her and lost her again in the roar of the collapsing building. Then it was 1978, a snowy street in winter. A woman with red hair was loading the last of something into the back of a van, her breath making small clouds in the cold. She said she thought that was everything. It was MJ, the bearded man beside her, who wore Peter Parker's face, but something heavier behind his eyes, said he was sorry Peter hadn't come down. He just couldn't. The woman with him, who wore Gwen's face and Gwen's voice and all of Gwen's memories, said she understood. It had taken her a long time to accept what she was, even after all the test results. She had Peter's memories, his feelings, but they had a second chance. They were going to take it. They were going to start a new life. As Ben and Helen Parker, 2 copies, beginning again in a new town. The bearded man said he still couldn't wrap his head around it all. MJ, watching them go, said her friend was gone. Then she looked at the woman who wore Gwen's face and said she was still here. MJ said they would always be friends. She watched them climb into the van and drive away into the snow. Back upstairs in a cold apartment, the real Peter Parker sat in a chair and did not move. MJ came to find him. She called him Tiger, the old name from long ago, and he looked at her with something that had no word for it. She told him they were gone, that she understood why he couldn't go down to say goodbye, and that she thought they would be okay. Then, being furious, Peter asked about Harry. Harry, who had vanished after the explosion, who had apparently disappeared quietly and left MJ with his fortune. Peter said she didn't even have to sleep with Harry anymore. Peter asked where his new life was. And then neither of them had anything left to say that mattered. MJ looked at him, really looked at him, and said that was not true. That he had nothing was not true at all. He said her name, just her name. And she held on to him in the cold and quiet of that apartment. 2 people who had lost different things and arrived in the same place. And that was where the decade ended. Mary Jane Watson Parker had been waiting 3 weeks. She lay in a hospital bed, 9 months pregnant with twins, telling herself that Peter had never been missing this long before. His timing was as impeccable as ever. When May arrived at the door, she called MJ as Gwen. She asked where Peter was. MJ told her softly that it was Mary Jane now, and that Peter was on his way. MJ stared down at her swollen belly, thinking that this was what she had signed up for when she agreed to married life. 9 months pregnant, taking care of a 90-year-old aunt, and no husband in sight. She picked up a tracker device. It told her it was saying he was nowhere, nowhere it could find. She looked out at the city and asked the empty room where he was. He was 1,000,000 miles away. It was 1984. Peter Parker stood in the chaos of Battleworld, a place conjured by a godlike being called the Beyonder, who had assembled the greatest heroes and villains on Earth for his own entertainment. Peter reflected that he had spent his 20s trying to avoid the war in Vietnam, and yet here he was, surrounded by the Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, and creatures of impossible power, all of them tearing each other apart on an alien landscape. He told himself it was insanity, but the only sure way back home to Mary Jane was to win. In a brief, quiet moment on the Beyonder's Battleworld, Peter found Reed Richards, older now, white-bearded, a ghost of the Titan he had once been. Reed pulled Peter aside and told him he had wanted a moment to talk, that he was proud of what Peter had built with Parker Industries. He said it was fantastic, that Peter should be proud. He apologized for how things had been between them, his voice stumbling over the words. Peter told him it was okay, that it meant a lot. Peter reflected, watching Reed walk away, that the man was a haunting mirror. Reed had pushed away his wife, his friends, all of it in service to the planet and to Victor Von Doom. And after you pushed away everyone you loved, what was left? He turned his attention back to the fight. Thor noticed his suit was torn and teased him. Peter deflected by saying some of them still sat at home at night with needle and thread, as they did not have Asgardian tailors. The Hulk cut in and pointed toward an adjoining room, telling him that there was a device there, that he should just think about what he wanted, and it would make it for him. Peter stepped into the room, sat down, and thought of Mary Jane. He thought of flying home across the universe. And just like that, everything changed. 2 more weeks passed on Battleworld. Gods fought gods. Peter witnessed unimaginable things, but they won. He swung home through the night sky of New York, dressed in a black alien costume that had formed itself around him in that room. A strange, reactive material that responded to his thoughts. Something felt off, he told himself. Maybe it was just the new suit. Maybe it was just the weeks of a secret war. The city was quiet. He prayed everything was okay. He passed the Parker Industries sign, dropped onto a fire escape, and called out for May. MJ spun around in shock when the black-suited figure appeared in the doorway. Peter pulled off the mask and told her it was him. He was back. MJ rushed into his arms, sobbing. Peter held her and asked about the babies. She told him it was hard, that there had been complications. But then she smiled through her tears and told him to meet Claire and Benjamin. Peter stared down at his sleeping children and came apart entirely. He kept apologizing for not being there. MJ told him the world had gone crazy. He held her and said he knew. Well, she was right. It had. While Earth's greatest heroes had been gone, the Cold War had boiled over. Russia, long fearing that America's superheroes would eventually be turned on them like weapons, had seen the window of opportunity and struck. America struck back. But Russia had superpowered beings of its own, none of whom had disappeared to Battleworld. Among them was Ivan Kragov, known as the Red Ghost, a scientist who had developed a technology to render matter intangible. He used it on incoming missiles. The heroes who had remained behind did everything they could, but it wasn't enough. The Vision, the android Avenger, had intercepted one missile and altered its course to spare Manhattan. It still came down just outside Allentown, Pennsylvania. Vision went intangible on impact and survived physically unharmed, but he had stood in the center of it all, watching people and homes and nature itself get wiped away. Afterward, he remained intangible. No one knew whether it was the explosion that had locked him that way, or the horror of what he had witnessed. Peter came to the site with Parker Industries to help clean up the radiation. He told Reed over a video call that the radio sponges were nearly set up. They should absorb enough to save the area. Reed, half distracted, said it looked like Peter had some problems at home too and held up a newspaper. The headline read, "Spider-Man, Murderer." Someone was wearing a black suit. Someone was killing criminals while wearing his face. Peter muttered that he never used to have crazy copycats and considered just having the suit mimic his old red and blue costume. Reed told him to slow down, that since they had been working together again, he had been studying Peter's new suit, scanning it, and it appeared that the suit was alive, a symbiote attaching itself to Peter both mentally and physically. Peter said quietly that he knew. Reed stared at him. Peter explained that he was a scientist too. The first thing he had done when he got home, in between the babies and developing the radio sponges, was study it. He had been wearing it sparingly to halt full bonding. He had even given Mary Jane a device capable of stopping it, in case he somehow lost control. Reed asked him why then. Why keep wearing it at all? Peter said he was getting older. The suit helped him stay strong. He needed to protect people. He needed to be relevant. Reed told him he didn't need to lift cars to help people. His mind, his company, that was enough. The phone rang. It was MJ May had wandered off with the babies. Peter arrived home to find police at the door. MJ explained in a rush that May had walked down 8th Avenue with Claire and Benji in the stroller, and an officer had found her staring into a shop window while the twins cried. The officer suggested gently that they might want to look into specialists for May. Peter and MJ exchanged a glance. The argument that followed was a long time coming. MJ said flatly that May needed a senior's home. She raised Peter when his parents died, she said, her voice rising. She took care of him when no one else would. Now it was their turn to take care of her. She told Peter she could tolerate his absences. She had gotten used to feeling like she was always running second to the ghost of Gwen Stacy. But she had had enough. He was a father now, a caretaker. He needed to be home. And even that stupid suit was interfering. It was like he was addicted to it. Peter snapped back that everyone thought they knew what was right for him. He said he didn't need the suit, and then he walked to a trash can on the street and dropped the black symbiote into it. MJ held his gaze and asked quietly what he needed. Did he even know? He said, yeah, he did. He put on the red and blue suit. Peter swung into the night air and admitted to himself that she was right. He had let everything get out of control. There was a war happening, and he was everywhere except where he needed to be most, with his family. He had sworn after letting Uncle Ben die that he would never turn his back on things that were wrong, but there was so much wrong. He needed to focus. All of a sudden, he found a man in a black suit, his black suit, standing in the rain, a rifle in hand. Peter thought it through. Taking down someone impersonating him, someone murdering criminals, seemed exactly like the kind of clear, uncomplicated problem he needed right now. He moved in. The black-suited figure fired. Peter dodged. They fought across the wet rooftops and fire escapes. Then he saw the face beneath the mask, and the bottom dropped out of everything. It was Kraven the Hunter. Peter was confused. Kraven wasn't even in his usual tier of villains. He wasn't someone with powers. He was a hunter, a deluded one. And then Kraven stabbed him. Peter felt something spreading through the wound, warm and wrong, some kind of drug on the blade. He asked Kraven why. Kraven, holding him against the wall, said something about their countries. Kraven stood over Peter and explained himself. He was dying, cancer, and yet still stronger than the spider. He had lived in America for a long time now. It was his home. He had tussled with Peter, hunted him, and in doing so had hunted all the beautiful things. He said America and Russia were at war now, and the land he had come to call home was bereft of a true hero. Peter, weakening, told him he had a wife. Kids. Craven looked at him with something like grief. He said Peter had once been beautiful, a warrior, and to see him barely existing anymore, it was heartbreaking. He said Peter deserved a warrior's exit. The gunshot came like a full stop. Peter woke in absolute darkness. He was cold, weak. There was pain, which meant he was still alive. He reached up and his knuckles hit wood. His lungs registered the thinning air. Almost gone. He was in a coffin. He was buried. He screamed anyway. At home, May sat quietly with MJ, who was watching the babies. MJ said that Peter disappears. It's what he does. She had just thought it would be different now. The knocking at the door began. Hard. Wrong. MJ told May to stay. She moved toward the door and the window exploded inward. The black symbiote, the one Peter had thrown in the trash can, came surging through the glass, wild and alive and desperate. MJ backed away in terror and then understood. The costume was alive. It really was. And it was desperate to find Peter. Something had happened. At the grave, the symbiote's tendrils found the headstone, a grave that Craven had prepared, reading, "Here lies Spider-Man, slain by the hunter." The symbiote pressed itself into the earth. Peter thought to himself that he was old, too weak. He apologized to whoever it was reaching for. Then, summoning what it had left, it tore open the grave with a raw, breaking scream. Peter Parker clawed his way out of the coffin, fully merged with the black suit, changed, furious, barely himself. He moved through the city. He crossed a mugging in an alley and stopped it, almost casually, the symbiote making him something other than what he normally was. He became a monster. Then he found Craven. Peter told him it was over. He said Craven had stabbed him, shot him, buried him. He told him he was going to kill him. Craven looked at the creature Peter had become. The black mass of the symbiote curling around him, the enormous white eyes, the teeth, and his voice softened into something like wonder. He said Peter had done it. He had become what he needed to. He said Peter was beautiful. He told him he knew what to do. Peter, in whatever was left of himself inside the symbiote, called for MJ. Through the downpour, MJ was already there. She held the device she had built to stop the suit. Peter begged her not to make him. The suit was fighting, pulling him toward Craven, toward the kill. His voice broke open. He told her he loved her. MJ raised the device and fired. The sonic blast tore through the symbiote. It shrieked and shredded off Peter's body in ribbons of darkness, and Peter collapsed onto the wet street. MJ rushed to him and held him. He kept saying he was sorry. She held on. Back at the apartment, movers carried out boxes. It was a quiet moment in the story of a marriage, ordinary and devastating at once. Peter's internal voice ran beneath all of it, soft and exhausted. He said he tries. He really does. He tries to keep everyone safe, tries to keep everyone together. But it always falls apart. He is trapped in a war of his own making, and it never ends. He doesn't know what to do. May sat in the doorway in a chair, watching the world from a great distance. Peter sat elsewhere, alone in the middle of the move, saying again that he didn't know what to do. Craven was in his trophy room. Animal heads lined the walls above him. He spoke quietly to his mother's memory. He said he did it. Talking to his mother in his mind, he said that he was done. Somehow, the confrontation burned something out of him. He looked out the window at the last golden light of the evening and said it was beautiful. But he said he could not hunt the sun. He raised the rifle to end his life. The symbiote, somehow still present, drifting through the house in tendrils, wrapped itself around the barrel of the gun. Chicago, 1995. On the city's south side, a journalist named Lori and her photographer partner were covering the fourth downtown fire in a week. Lori told him to get as close as he could for shots and that she'd track down the fire chief for a quote. The photographer muttered that he was hoping the chaos would draw out the mysterious Chicago vigilante people had taken to calling the Red Mask. The building ahead exploded in another shower of fire. Then everything went sideways. Dr. Octopus arrived in a roar of metal arms, snatching Lori off her feet. Otto Octavius, older now but still formidable, called the photographer by his name, Ben Riley. Doc Ock said that he had seen him lurking at the back of the funeral of May some months ago. He said he had thought at first he was just some shameful distant relative, but then he found out the truth. He had needed to have him. He said that unless the man wanted the young lady's head crushed, he would come along because he had a doctor's appointment. While that was unfolding in Chicago, New York had problems of its own. At the Parker Industries Tower, a well-dressed Tony Stark sat across from a visibly exhausted Peter Parker and made his pitch. He said the merger simply made sense, that Peter looked terrible, and that if Peter didn't actually want to run a company, he could stay in the lab. That could be arranged at Stark International. Peter told him flatly that he was going to stop making weapons. Stark pushed back hard, reminding him that his weapons had won the Russian war, that they had saved lives and kept peace across the world. And Peter made cell phones and adhesives. Stark said if Peter wanted to make him the villain, fine, he would be the villain. But he suggested Peter picture a world without Tony Stark. Peter's patience broke. He told Stark that he had undoubtedly helped America, but that he had also helped various regimes with his guns and his missiles that fell into the wrong hands. He said if Tony ever again insinuated that he didn't care about his children's safety, he would beat him so fast that his bodyguard Iron Man would be looking at job listings the following week. He told his assistant to please help Mr. Stark find his way to the street. Before the anger had even settled, his phone rang. It was Jessica Jones from Alias Investigations, calling on a business line. She told him the person he had asked her to track was still in Jersey, still in that industrial area, hadn't left in nearly a week. With business concluded, she asked lightly whether it was his place or hers tonight. Peter told her it was neither. He said he was sorry. He set the phone down and stared at the family photograph on his desk. MJ, Claire, Benji. He told himself he was just exhausted. Stark was plotting a takeover and he had to start figuring out how to save the company. He stared at the red and blue Spider-Man suit. Later, swinging through the New York night in his red and black suit, Peter reflected that he was still doing it. Still Spider-Man, dutiful and joyless, like an old man forcing himself to the gym. He had tried to stop, he told himself. He had thought that if he could actually give it up, he might win MJ back. But with great power came great guilt, and he could not turn his back on people who needed help. While Peter occupied himself with muggers and bank robbers, he wondered, he was just tricking himself into thinking he was actually making a difference. Maybe Stark was right. Maybe thinking big was the answer. Then his police radio earpiece clicked on, and he heard a key word he never thought he would hear again. Otto Octavius was bellowing for Spider-Man to show himself. He had come back to New York. He had thrown a city bus into an intersection. Peter thought back to the last time he had seen Otto standing at the back of Aunt May's funeral. May had left Otto long before she died, and afterward he had simply vanished. Peter had assumed Florida. He muttered to himself that why retire when you could throw city buses? The fight was brutal and one-sided. Peter's body was not what it had once been, and his doctor had told him he should really only be catching cars these days. He endured blow after blow, telling himself he was going to pay for this later. Then Doc Ock said something that stopped him cold. He called him Peter, not Spider-Man. Otto said that time was short. He no longer had the luxury of toying with him. The clock was ticking, deafening, he said. He just needed results. He gasped the air around them both. Peter went under. Peter woke in darkness to the hum of computers and the familiar purple tint of Oscorp's underground. His mask was off. Harry Osborn was across the room, also restrained. Peter called out to him in confusion. Then a third voice answered. Ben Riley stepped out of the shadows, wrists bound, eyes hard. He said quietly that it had been a while. Otto, standing before banks of equipment in the center of the room, called it a family reunion, the brothers and their stepfather. Peter turned on him immediately, telling him not to ruin May's memory with whatever he was planning. Otto's composure cracked slightly. He told Peter to let the gas wear off and then try to break free. He said May had been his everything. When she left him, she said it was because of his anger, but he had never once hurt her. And now she was gone. Everyone he knew was gone. Except Peter. When he had finally put it all together and realized that May's nephew and May's nephew's companion were both Spider-Man, both Peter Parker, he had known he had to act. He explained that Warren's cloning work had been largely destroyed. The only remaining files existed at Oscorp. He had needed the only 2 living specimens to study them, to reverse engineer the process, to save himself. Otto said he was dying. He could feel death closing in. And then he found out about them. He turned to his screen and told them that the scan was complete. He needed Harry and Ben both to see if there were faults in the cloning process, to build himself a new body. He stared at the readout, and his expression shifted into something between elation and horror. Peter Parker was the clone. The room went very quiet. Ben stared at the screen. He said it wasn't possible. He told Peter to listen to him. Otto couldn't be right. Peter said quietly that he knew. But Ben was already somewhere else entirely. He said that he had spent years telling himself day after day, morning after morning, that those memories were not his own. That he was not Peter Parker. That he was just a copy who needed to accept what he was and live accordingly. And now it turned out his memories were correct. He lunged at Peter, screaming that Peter had stolen his life. Every villain with grand plans, every person Ben had loved, Warren, Otto, all of them, had taken something from him. And the whole time, he said, Peter had been living his life. Peter grabbed Ben by the shoulders and told him that Miles Warren had stolen his life. Not Peter. He said he had just wanted to live. He had Peter Parker's sense of right and wrong, he said. And he had been doing the only thing he knew how to do with it. Harry, watching from across the room, said quietly that he didn't know what the truth was, but he had to put an end to it. Ben turned to Peter with burning eyes and demanded to know who Peter even was. Did Peter suspect all these years? Did he know? Peter said he didn't know. He told Ben they were the same, both of them. He said that if he had known, he would not have kept it from Ben. Otto cut the moment short. He said that 2 infernal Peter Parkers were better than 1, and he could still extract their secrets from their corpses. Harry screamed no. He threw himself directly into the path of Otto's mechanical arm. The blow hit him full in the torso. He went down hard, making a sound that was not quite a word. Otto recoiled. He said that he hadn't meant to. Ben called him a murderer from the floor. Peter was already moving, attacking Otto with everything he had, telling him he would pay for it. Otto scrambled backward, crashing through a window, screaming that he didn't mean to. Didn't mean to, as he fell and clawed his way out of the building below. Peter pulled Ben up to the rooftop by a web line, arms shaking with the effort. Harry was badly hurt, ribs broken, breathing shallow. He looked up at Peter and said he was sorry. He said he had always been weak. Weak with his father, weak with Otto, weak his whole life. He said he was glad Peter had married Mary Jane. He said Pete was his best friend. Then his eyes closed. Sometime later, on a different rooftop, Ben and Peter met in the daylight. They had both reviewed Otto's test results independently. Peter told him that Otto had not been lying. The data was real, but Peter had done his own testing. Ben was the original. Ben had lived for nearly 20 years as Ben Riley, trying to forget he was ever Peter Parker, said that he had lived so long as Ben that he didn't know how to begin again. or whether he should. Peter reached into his coat and produced a dossier. He told him it was his life, the one Peter had been living. People in his orbit, passwords, routines, access to the private lab, both of their costumes. Everything needed to pick it all back up. He said that Ben had lived a quiet life, while Peter had lived the loud one. He was tired now. He couldn't keep going. He had spent decades building Parker Industries and wearing the mask, all while Ben never had the chance to find out what he could have been. Ben took the dossier and said the handoff was too long. It had been too long. He looked at it and told Peter that if a man who looked exactly like Peter started his own company and went out as a superhero with the same powers, people would eventually figure it out. Peter said Ben was probably itching to try by now. He told him to take it. It was all his. Ben told Peter that years ago, when he left, he had promised himself he wouldn't draw attention by being a superhero. But they were both Peter Parker, so he supposed he couldn't entirely help himself. Peter said he was sorry. He said neither of them could escape their stupid sense of responsibility. But they could shift it to where it mattered. They embraced. Peter said so long. Ben told him to take care. Peter called Jessica Jones from the street outside Parker Industries and told her that a lot had happened in the last week and asked where their surveillance target was. She told him the target was still in that industrial area in New Jersey. Peter thanked her and said he'd explain everything later. There was something almost lighter in his voice than she had heard in a long time. So, he went to Jersey. The warehouse was dark and cluttered with old equipment, Green Goblin masks on shelves, bats and gliders hanging in shadows. Norman Osborn sat in an armchair in the middle of it all, reading a book, like a man who had simply chosen a strange place to retire. He looked up when Peter entered and greeted him warmly, calling him the esteemed head of Parker Industries. Peter told him he knew everything. Norman dropped the act entirely. He said he had been pretending to be broken since his release from prison, the crazy old man put out to pasture. But Peter had been watching, and now Peter was here, which meant Peter had figured it out. Norman had been the one who told Otto who Peter was. He had told him about the cloning. And most importantly, he had given Otto access to the old Oscorp equipment, where the test results could be controlled, predetermined, to show that Peter was the clone. One final attempt to undo Peter's life. Peter told him it hadn't worked. He had done his own independent testing. He was still the original. He was Peter Parker. The original Peter Parker. Norman smiled and called him a clever boy. He said he bet there had been a moment of doubt, though. He said he wished he could have seen it. Peter said it wasn't doubt. Norman's smile became something harder. He told Peter that he had put him in prison, ruined his plans and his escape. If he couldn't destroy Peter personally, he would destroy his company. Maybe Stark needed help with his takeover bid. Harry had Parker stock, and that boy's weakness had always been Norman's greatest tool. Peter went very still. He said quietly that Norman didn't even know. He told him that Harry was dead. Otto had killed him. The change in Norman was immediate and total. He put his face in his hands. Then something broke open in him, and he turned on Peter with everything he had left, screaming that Parker was the reason his son was dead. He launched himself at Peter on a goblin glider, firing, shrieking that Peter had killed his boy. Peter caught the glider. He told Norman it was over. They fought in the rubble of the dark room. Norman screamed that it would never be over. Peter got him in a hold and held on as Norman gasped and clawed, and finally went limp, whispering hate with his last conscious breath. Peter stood over him for a moment. He thought that Norman could have been so much more. Even after everything, he had had a son who loved him. And what had he done with that? Plotted revenge. Stayed locked in an endless war with Peter Parker. For what? He flew out of New Jersey on the first available flight. He rented a car. He drove through mountains. He pulled up in front of a red brick house in a quiet neighborhood. A red-headed girl peered through the gap in the front door, uncertain. Peter stepped out of the car onto the lawn. The door opened wider. Claire and Benjamin Parker came sprinting across the grass toward their father, and he caught them both at a dead run, holding on tight, face buried in their hair. Mary Jane Watson stood in the doorway of that house and watched Peter walk toward her, a child's hand in each of his, moving through the afternoon light. The house was quiet. The door closed. It was 2006, in the middle of a street fight that was already going badly. Ben, the clone of Peter Parker, who had been quietly carrying the Spider-Man name for years, was being hurled through a New York City taxi, his suit shredding on impact. His opponent, the pale and ancient energy vampire known as Morlun, observed him with something between contempt and disappointment. Morlun told him that the real Spider had known this would happen and had left his copy to die. Ben insisted, bloody and defiant, that he was Spider-Man. Morlun was unmoved. He had known from the moment he laid eyes on Ben that this wasn't the one he hunted. This was an imposter, a copy. Morlun had him by the throat and told him quietly that he himself was forever. Far away in Portland, Oregon, Peter Parker, the original, now somewhere in his 60s, was splitting firewood behind a modest house tucked into the woods. To the outside world, he was an electrician. To his family, he was a father. His teenage daughter Claire sat nearby, and they were arguing, with the worn edges of a conversation they'd had before, about whether she'd thought any more about Stanford. Peter told her gently that the full scholarship wouldn't wait. Claire told him she didn't want to be just another student doing what was expected of her. Their son Benji burst through the back door looking pale, telling them to come quick. It was Ben. The television said it plainly. Spider-Man dead. Below that, a smaller line. Hero revealed to be industrialist Peter Parker. Parker Industries had not yet made a statement. Peter stared at the screen. A man named Ezekiel had visited him years ago, he told them, spouting things Peter had dismissed as nonsense at the time, that he was a spider totem, that a creature called Morlun would one day come to feed on him. Peter hadn't listened, and now Ben was dead for it. His mind moved quickly. He needed to fly out, track Morlun, stay one step ahead. MJ's voice cut across the panic. Tony Stark would use this to seize the company. Parker Industries was exposed. MJ told him it didn't matter. Peter decided to go alone, and as MJ tried to interfere, he told her that he didn't want a discussion. Claire cornered her father in his study. She told him he couldn't run from this. Morlun was already killing people and would keep killing more unless Peter stopped him. He had known about the monster, and now Ben was gone. Peter's voice broke at the edges. He talked about Ben. He said that even when Ben had everything, the company, the Parker name, he'd had no one, no friends, no partners. He had been so afraid of losing it all. And then Peter had let it happen. He'd walked away, handed someone else his name, and hidden in the woods where he couldn't see anyone suffering. Claire said he had to go back to New York. He had to be Spider-Man again. Peter said he hadn't been that in years. Claire reminded him of the trip to Jonah's funeral. He'd told Mary Jane he hadn't put on a mask that day, but he'd taken the mask with him. Claire had seen him on the news. A quick shot. It took her months to understand, but she knew. The dad she knew couldn't turn away when people needed help. That was precisely why they lived in a house in the woods. If he couldn't see suffering, he didn't have to answer it. But the world only got worse while he stayed hidden. Tony Stark's Superhuman Registration Act had drafted their old friends, people who had already given their lives to others, simply for existing. She told her father he couldn't wait for injustice to knock on his door. He had the power. He had to fight for a better tomorrow. In Washington, Tony Stark, now Secretary of Defense and the man responsible for enforcing the Registration Act, was at the White House getting briefed by an aide. The political situation was deteriorating. One of the most notorious unregistered heroes had turned out to be one of his biggest business rivals, and it wasn't playing well in the media. Tony pressed his face into his hands and admitted quietly that he and Peter had never seen eye to eye, but he had respected Spider-Man. Then the aide interrupted. The Daily Bugle had broken a story about Peter Parker. Back in New York, Peter sat across from Betty Brant, older and lined but still sharp. She told him the genie was out of the bottle. Half the public would accept the clone story. The other half would start digging, matching Spider-Man sightings to Peter Parker's documented whereabouts. She noted with dry candor that it might well be the Bugle doing the digging. She told Peter he didn't know who that man really was or what Peter was trying to accomplish. But Spider-Man no longer had a secret to keep. Peter walked the New York streets in a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to pass as a stranger. He told himself that all he was doing was buying time, hopefully drawing Moreland out, and that Claire was right. He needed to stop Moreland before anyone else got hurt. And after that, no more Spider-Man. No more. Tony Stark was waiting for him on the steps of Parker Industries. Tony greeted him pleasantly, noting that Peter was back from the dead. Then he got to the point. He was there to offer a deal, a good one, the only one. Peter told him he was there to run his company and had no time for whatever Tony was selling. Tony studied him with the detachment of someone taking inventory. Skin density 10 times normal, leg muscles barely exerting effort, a faint trace of radiation. The man had barely aged. Then Tony said Spider-Man's name like a key, turning in a lock. He laid it out calmly. The Civil War was worsening. Steve Rogers and his resistance were getting people hurt while enemies grew bolder, watching heroes fight heroes. The real problem, Tony said, was always old men. The younger generation had registered out of duty or fear. They'd fallen in line. It was the veterans, the ones who thought they knew better, who kept pulling things apart. Then came the threat. Because Peter had never registered under the Superhuman Act, the government had grounds to seize Parker Industries, assets possibly built through powers. Tony even suggested, with a cold lightness, that Peter's spider sense might have given him an unfair edge in business, something close to insider trading through superpowers. Then came the offer. Amnesty, a clean record, the company's shares transferred safely to Peter's family. In return, he would get a position as a U.S. Avenger on the side of law and justice. Peter told him to drop dead. Tony sighed and called his team. Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, War Machine, and others descended around them on the street. He told Peter he really wished he hadn't said that. Back at the house in Portland, MJ sat in the kitchen with Benji and Claire, the television running in the background. The headline had updated, "Peter Parker, alive." Claire said he should have gone with his father. Only one of them needed to stay to protect the others. She was watching the window when she suddenly screamed for Benji to grab their mother and run. Moreland came through the wall. He stepped through the rubble with the ease of someone who had all the time in the world and asked pleasantly whether Peter was home. In New York, Peter was scrambling through the streets in civilian clothes, his spider sense firing while his aging body struggled to keep pace with the warnings. He noted grimly to himself that it had been too long. His instincts were intact, but his body had grown rusty. Iron Man hit him hard, harder than he could absorb cleanly, and sent him crashing through a city bus and into the pavement. Peter, wiping blood from his mouth, asked Tony how he slept at night. Tony told him honestly that he hadn't slept in years. Too much work, too many people who needed help. He believed in what he was doing, a unified front, keeping the world safe. Peter told him he wasn't sure he agreed, and neither was the man with the shield. Captain America answered from behind him. Rogers had arrived with his resistance, Cloak, Hawkeye, Luke Cage, and Dagger at his flanks. and issued the single word that had always meant something. Avengers assemble. Meanwhile, in the woods outside Portland, Moreland had disabled the family's car, a melted wreck in the driveway, and was hunting the Parkers through the trees, taunting them as he went. He remarked with theatrical hunger that he wondered where he might find a snack. MJ screamed for her children. Moreland cornered them, the kids between him and their mother, and smiled. And all of a sudden, Claire and Benji lunged towards him. On the other hand, the Civil War battle tore across the street. Peter, thinking coolly through the chaos, told himself that the whole thing was a mess, but he needed everyone still standing when Moreland showed up. He had to take a side. He had to do the right thing. He fought for Cap, for Claire and Benji, for MJ, for Uncle Ben. Inside Parker Industries, Peter had broken through to a hidden room behind a bookshelf. A safe clicked open. Inside were his Spider-Man suits, multiple versions, waiting exactly where he'd left them. On the other hand, something unexpected had already happened. In an earlier scramble, Claire had scratched him, and Moreland had bled. Benji had noticed, and the family's fear shifted slightly. He was supposed to be indestructible. Their father had told them so. And yet, Benji, gasping, told Claire to wait. When Moreland had him on the ropes, she should hit him with everything she had. Moreland had Benji pinned to the ground. Moreland seized Benji and began to drain the life force from him, glowing with dark energy. He crowed that the young always imagined they could fight the immortal. He told them the curse of living forever belonged only to him. And then Claire happened. She hit Moreland from behind with the force of someone who had inherited more from her father than his nose for trouble. She drove him off Benji and into the tree line. Then, with grief and fury, and something that looked like absolute resolve, she drove a broken branch through him with everything she had. Moreland gurgled that she couldn't. He went still. On the New York streets, now in his suit, Peter confronted Tony openly. He said that he and Ben had always known Tony couldn't let a group of powered people operate without a remote failsafe, a kill switch only Tony controlled. Tony had always had to be pulling the strings. Peter told him he was manipulative, egotistical, and incapable of trust. He used that knowledge to disrupt Tony's Avengers mid-battle. Tony called Steve and Peter idiots. He said the public was exhausted by endless destruction, sick of watching powered individuals act as though accountability didn't apply to them. The Superhuman Act wasn't about policing the best of them, he said. It was about protecting everyone else. The world needed cohesion. Peter told him to shut up. He said he would not be at Tony's beck and call just because of what he was. Tony had proved today that he couldn't be trusted. Tony shifted approaches smoothly. He told Peter this was the U.S. Army, and Peter was being drafted. He had a choice, the disciplinary barracks or a captaincy. Peter touched a finger at Tony's chest and it went through. The hologram image turned and told him he knew where to find him. Steve asked Cloak to transport the team back to base. Peter apologized to Steve for running. He had wanted to protect his wife and kids. He knew it had been wrong to leave. Cap told him quietly that his children needed to forgive him, and that one day, Tony would come for them too. He warned Peter not to count on that being far away. Peter told him there was an energy vampire tracking him, a creature called Moreland. Cap said they would deal with it together. Peter said they were both old men. He said that was exactly the point. Old men had an obligation to do what they should have done all along and leave the world a better place before they went. They walked forward together into whatever was coming next. Peter Parker confessed to Mary Jane that he had been having the same dream lately, the dream of the day Uncle Ben died, the day he let the robber get away. He said it felt so real, but that something about it felt different this time. As the robber ran, a voice called out to him in reality, and he woke up. It was 2019. An older Peter, gray-haired and weathered, kissed Mary Jane goodbye on the doorstep. There was also Miles Morales, the younger Spider-Man. Benji reminded him that once the component was installed, it would take at least 5 minutes to charge before it would work. Peter's daughter Claire wanted to come along, but Peter asked her to stay behind to protect her mother and her brother. He noted quietly to himself that Claire was twice the hero he had been at her age. No doubts, no hang-ups, just decisive leadership. She had been shaped by the superhero civil war, a war that ended with both sides losing. The villains won. On their way to Doom's orbital space station, Peter and Miles flew in a vessel designed by Victor von Doom. Miles joked about the ship's design, comparing their mission to a Star Wars. Peter laid out the plan. Doom had no idea about Tony Stark's old space lab. The Doomsday machine, once triggered, would shut down all of Doom's technology on a global scale, and then the station's auto-destruct would activate, ensuring no one could reverse the process. It was a one-way mission in spirit, though Peter seemed resigned to that. He thought to himself how Miles had been growing by leaps and bounds in his scientific studies, and how remarkable it was that the same thing had happened to Miles that had once happened to him. Bitten by a spider, became a hero. Peter didn't mind that Miles had taken the Spider-Man name, while Peter was presumed dead. He had earned it. As they boarded the station, Peter reflected on the state of the world. Captain America, Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Jessica Drew, everyone was either dead or missing. Doom had torn through them. The world had grown tired of heroes fighting heroes, and Doom had stepped in with an iron hand. Peter now led the resistance, by virtue of age and experience. But this new generation, Miles, Claire, Kamala, were far more put together than Peter had been at their age. His greatest responsibility now, he told himself, was not just to help the world, but to give this generation everything he had left. He didn't finish the thought. They installed the component on the backup power source. It would need 10 minutes to charge and create the global disruptor pulse. Peter went to scout the station while Miles stayed with the machine. He noted that Miles was under pressure. This was, after all, his first time in space, and reminded himself to give the boy some slack. Then the spider sense that Peter had relied on for decades stayed silent. Something else was aboard the station, and it wasn't triggering his danger instinct, which meant it wasn't exactly a threat, or it was something his sense couldn't detect. A voice called his name and announced that they had once told him they would go to the ends of the earth to hunt him. Venom dropped from the shadows. But it wasn't just any venom. It was Kraven the Hunter bonded to the symbiote, hunting Peter as he had always wished to, calling this the ultimate challenge. Peter's spider sense hadn't gone off because the symbiote doesn't trigger it. The fight was brutal. Peter was older now, and his reflexes weren't what they used to be. Kraven slammed Peter brutally across the station floor. Then he turned his attention to the smaller spider, Miles, telling him he had been waiting to hunt him too, biding his time until Miles was a worthy challenge. Miles called him by his first name, Sergei, and gave a solid challenge. But he grabbed Miles and began crushing his helmet. But Miles managed to fire back, breaking free momentarily. Kraven then did something unexpected. He offered Miles his other, the symbiote, telling him to let it become a part of him so they could do great things together. Miles hesitated. Then a laugh escaped him, a sudden, disbelieving laugh. Peter, battered and kneeling on the floor, took that opening. He fired a blinding sonic blast from Peter's wrist device, hit Kraven full in the face, and the result was catastrophic, a shattering explosion that left behind nothing but a skeleton and debris. Miles stared at the remains and asked simply if that was just a skeleton. Peter stood amidst the wreckage, collecting himself, and said quietly that all his enemies were dead. Miles looked back at him, wary. Something was wrong. Peter recognized him. Miles had been possessed by Otto Octavius, Dr. Octopus, who had been inhabiting his body, and Otto, now exposed, made no attempt to hide it. But he wasn't alone in the room with his own thoughts for long, because Peter fired his electric webbing, 3 rapid shots, and both of them were struck and stunned simultaneously. Peter explained his own thinking afterward. Two men with spider sense should make it nearly impossible for either to land a punch on the other. But Miles had powers that Peter did not, the venom blasts and camouflage, which threw off his visual tracking. And Peter's reflexes were no longer what they used to be. But even as they grappled, Peter kept Otto talking. He told Otto that his performance as Miles was perfect, but then laid out exactly how he knew. Little things at first. The funny remarks. Otto's use of Craven's real name Sergei, knowledge he would have from his Dr. Octopus days. And then the moment the symbiote grabbed him, Otto had reacted with fear and revulsion that Miles never would have shown. And beyond all that, Otto's technical work on the machine had been far too precise, far too good, but it was old and outdated. Then Otto revealed the full shape of his scheme. Doom had been the key. Doom had unleashed the power of Otto's mind, and all he needed from Otto in return was to keep tabs on Peter. But Otto had turned on Doom. He declared himself a hero now, superior to any of them. Peter spat back that sentencing a young man to death and stealing an old man's body was not the act of a real hero. Otto replied that he could easily kill Peter with Miles's body, but it would be far more rewarding to beat him the only way that truly mattered, with his mind. Then came a flash of light. The world went white. They were in a mindscape, a blank, featureless void. Otto appeared before Peter in his classic green Dr. Octopus form, his mechanical arms spreading wide around him. He told Peter plainly that it was simple. He was going to destroy his mind. He called Peter the brilliant disciple of Reed Richards, of Miles Warren, of Norman Osborn, and he was not going to take over Peter's brain the way he had done with young Miles. He was going to pound it to dust. And then the rogues gallery rose around Peter, Venom, Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Electro, Rhino, Vulture, all closing in. Peter looked at the army of his life's worst enemies bearing down on him. The battle in the mindscape raged. Peter reminded Otto that they had done this dance before, a lifetime of it, and it always ended the same way. What made Otto think this time would be any different? Because, Otto answered, Peter was still the same stunted man-child he had always been, whereas he had evolved. Now in the mindscape as his younger, restored self, dark-haired, wearing his green suit, Otto loomed triumphantly and asked if Peter had any more tricks, any more clever remarks. Or was he finally ready to admit it was over? Then a figure appeared that neither of them had expected. Aunt May walked quietly into the white space. Otto stared at her and breathed her name in shock. May looked at him with calm, sorrowful eyes and asked what he had done. Otto, suddenly undone, stood before her with his arms open. May did not raise her voice. She told him plainly that he had always been so angry at the future. She had loved him, but he could never accept the world around him or their limitations. What he was doing, she said, was not fair. Taking a young man's life so he could correct his own mistakes, that was not what love looked like. Otto began to crack. He said it wasn't fair that she had died. May interrupted him, gently but firmly. She said that she had lived her life. He had lived his. Did he want to be the hero now? Then let Miles go. Let his hatred for Peter go. It was never a competition for her love, Otto. There was no limit on love. Otto, the young, restored face he wore in the mindscape, started crumbling into grief. He said he was so scared. May cupped his face in her hands and told him it would be okay. To trust her. And Otto faded like a green dust. Peter watched this from nearby, shaking his head with a quiet smile, and remarked to himself that he had fought that man for decades, and it had taken a memory of her, a hug, to finish it. Then May turned to Peter. She told him what he already knew. What he truly wanted was to save Ben, but he couldn't. So he had spent his entire life saving everyone else. And he had managed to build something beautiful with Mary Jane, with sweet Benji and Claire. That filled her heart just knowing it. But he could not save Ben. He had understood that years ago. He had embraced it, and May told him to go. The mindscape began to crack, literally. The sounds of the real station breaking apart bled through. Peter snapped back to reality. The station was tearing itself apart from the damage the fighting had caused. The window had been blown out. He thought quickly and assessed the situation. The station was not going to last long enough to deploy Stark's doomsday pulse. He needed to buy some time. He asked the computer how long until the doomsday pulse activated. The computer answered, 4 minutes and 29 seconds. He told it to keep him updated. He was already carrying the unconscious Miles in his arms. He looked around. There was only ever one parachute pod, one escape. Otto, inside Miles's body, asked what was happening. Peter told him plainly, there was only one parachute. Otto protested immediately. He begged Peter to let him help. He said they could save everyone together. Miles, beginning to regain consciousness, also pleaded urgently from inside the pod. Peter told Otto what needed to be done. Someone had to stay behind, make sure the doomsday pulse worked, hold the station together long enough. He told Otto to go back, to be a hero, to give Miles his life back, to promise him, to promise May. Otto, looking at Peter with hollow eyes, whispered, he couldn't let Peter sacrifice a life that wasn't his own. Peter sealed the pod anyway and sent them off into space. Alone now, on the collapsing station, Peter worked. 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. The station was falling apart faster than he could patch it. He fired web after web, trying to brace the fractures, buying seconds. 1 minute and 30 seconds. He was running out of webbing. He just needed to hold on until the station lurched. No time left on the webbing. The countdown read 40 seconds. He said he was sorry. To Aunt May. Then the screen behind him flashed. Doomsday Pulse activated. In what followed, whether dream or final thought, Peter was young again. He and Mary Jane lay together on a bed, young faces close, her red hair spilling across the pillow. He told her he thought everything was going to be all right. She said, of course it was. He asked if she thought Otto would do the right thing. He said, yeah, he thought so. He asked about Benji and Claire. He said they taught them well. She said she wasn't going anywhere, unless, of course, she also got bitten by a radioactive spider and had to put herself in jeopardy every day. But how could he even believe her? She asked with a smile. She was just his brain cooking up an MJ clone. He shushed her gently and said they didn't use the C word anymore. He said that after decades together, he knew her better than he knew himself. Her worries, her dreams, everything she was about to say. He looked at her, close and warm, and said, "You're my heart, Mary Jane Watson." She smiled back and said, "You're my jackpot." The station exploded above the earth, a roaring, blazing burst of light that swept across the darkness of space and then was gone. His funeral was that day. Miles stood in a dim room beside a medical unit where Otto lay, shrunken, grotesque, barely alive and wired to machines, and told him about it. He said everyone was there. It was as though the city woke up and realized the world had changed, and they all needed to witness it together. He told Otto he wasn't sure why he had come. He just needed him to know that a true hero was gone. Otto, barely able to form words, said he was sorry. He had tried to be his best. He never meant to. He trailed off. He never meant to. Miles looked at him for a long moment and said he had wanted to kill him. Just reach down, pull the plugs, end everything. But Peter wouldn't have done that, and neither would he. He told Otto he could just lie there and think about the strength that takes. He left. Later, Miles came to Mary Jane's door. She greeted him with a hug, warm and genuine. He stepped inside. She thanked him for coming by. acknowledged it had been, and trailed off. He nodded. She asked how he had been handling everything. He said that everything was not well. Besides the obvious, having his life taken over by a monster, every time he interacted with someone, knowing they had talked with him when he was Doc Ock, and it all came back. He said he couldn't go out in costume anymore, knowing that Otto had been swinging around as him, beating people. Every part of his life felt tainted. Even the freedom of being Spider-Man, the part that was supposed to feel free, all of it contaminated. Mary Jane listened. Then she said gently that maybe Miles just needed a fresh start. She wasn't saying he should take over, just that he could alter it, make it his own, something new. She lifted a box from the table and offered it to him. Miles opened the box. Inside was the classic Spider-Man mask, the original red and blue, looking up at him from the tissue paper. And then, in a dream, Peter was speaking to Mary Jane, his voice carrying over the image of that old corridor, that fleeing robber, that terrible day, told her that he knew dreams were boring. But he kept having this one. It was the day Uncle Ben died, the day he let his killer get away. It was so real, MJ, like he was there again. And yes, he knew what she was going to say, but this was not him beating himself up again, like always. It was different this time. And, well, it was a good dream. So, yeah, that's Spider-Man life story, not just a superhero story. A lifetime, choices, regrets, love, and the weight of doing the right thing, even when it costs everything. And Peter? He never really figured it all out. He just kept trying, every single day. If that hit you even a little, drop a like, comment your favorite moment, and tell me, would you have made the same choices as Peter? Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And yeah, don't stop here. Watch the next video. Because trust me, this story isn't the only one that'll stay with you.